Right, so nothing sums Keir Starmer up quite like a dose of hypocrisy. A man who will say one thing and do another. A man for whom the rules that apply to we mere mortals that don't apply to him. But in light of the recent abuses of the Public Order Act and the Terrorism Act of 2000, Starmer has surpassed himself with this latest example. Where journalists have had their homes raided, where activists have been arrested for allegedly supporting a proscribed terror organisation, Starmer has now gone and invited the leader of one such group to the UK. But I suppose given this particular leader happens to be ridiculously pro-Israel, we shouldn't be too surprised he's doing this. You see, Keir Starmer has extended an invitation to Syria's President Ahmed al-Sharaa, better known as Al-Jolani, the self-appointed, unelected interim president of Syria, and of course leader of Hayat Tahrir al-Sham, or HTS, a group that remains on the UK's official list of proscribed terrorist organisations. When compared to the treatment of Hamas by comparison anti-Israel, pro-Palestine as they are, this political hospitality extended to a known jihadist figure is happening alongside the UK government's support for Israel and by extension its ongoing repression of pro-Palestinian voices, in part through heavy-handed application of the Terrorism Act. If this isn't political hypocrisy, I don't know what is. We have here the application of selective justice, rooted in ideological bias, foreign policy opportunism, and all amid an alarming erosion of democratic freedoms, not just in Palestine, but amongst minorities in Syria, who Al-Jolani is very much still repressing. Starmer appears, through his actions, to be placing himself above the law here, where some on the terrorist list are welcome and others are not. And if you seem to so much as express an opinion that can be construed as in favour of one side or the other, well, you might get a knock on the door by the fuzz, mightn't you? Right, so first and foremost, in the name of covering my own backside, disclaimer time. Nothing said in this video is meant as an endorsement or support for any group mentioned that is on the UK proscription list. But that isn't to say we can't expose such hypocrisy as appears to be on show here, courtesy of the UK's deeply unpopular and rapidly becoming ever more so Prime Minister Keir Starmer. HTS, formerly known as the Al-Nusra Front, and before that the Syrian branch of Al-Qaeda, might now be considered legitimate by many governments, but they remain on the UK proscribed organisations list, and for good reason. It's Al-Qaeda, for heaven's sake. Al-Jolani, its leader, has been implicated in multiple terrorist atrocities, both before his rise to power and frankly since, including attacks on Christian, Alawite and Druze minorities in Syria. The United Nations and human rights groups have documented a litany of abuses by HTS, including kidnappings, extrajudicial killings, and the suppression of civil liberties in areas under its control. And it's just continued since Al-Jolani took over following the fall of Assad last December. For years, Al-Jolani was the subject of a US government bounty, $10 million on his head, due to his role in global terrorism. That a man with such a resume of violence and extremism still continuing to this day would be not only welcomed, but invited to visit by a UK Prime Minister is, to say the least, disgusting. Not to mention rampantly hypocritical, given the arrests and police heavy-handedness involved in pro-Gaza and pro-Palestine demonstrations and protests. Starmer's invite to Al-Jolani comes amid increasing government repression of Palestine solidarity protests in the UK. Since the October 2023 escalation in Gaza, pro-Palestinian demonstrations have been met with mass arrests, bans and threats of criminal prosecution. The Terrorism Act has been wielded to criminalise speech, expression and association. Meanwhile, Hamas, which governs Gaza and also appears on the UK's proscribed list, is uniformly condemned by Starmer's government with no distinction made between its political and military wings, which is a very important point when it comes to the context of their deprescription legal case and the attacks on the lawyers currently representing them. The inconsistencies become even more troubling when considering that Hamas has never carried out an attack on UK soil, unlike Al-Qaeda. Few of us who were around at the time will ever forget that Al-Qaeda orchestrated the 7/7 bombings in London in 2005, a fact that should weigh heavily on any government's decision regarding foreign militant groups, especially ones related to them. And yet here is Keir Starmer, the self-declared Zionist, without qualification, extending a diplomatic olive branch to the leader of a group which has declared hostility to secularism, democracy and minority rights in Syria. Of course, Zionism is probably at the crux of the issue, isn't it? Al-Jolani is avowedly pro-Israel as well, to the extent Israel is still invading his country and he still hasn't raised a finger to stop it. Reports suggesting that he is keen on joining the Abraham Accords now too, the US brokered normalization agreements between Israel and several other Arab states. So Israel invades Syria and this guy still wants former diplomatic ties with them. But all of this aligns conveniently with Starmeroid foreign policy priorities. Terror designation be damned in light of that, it seems. The United Arab Emirates is reportedly now acting as an intermediary in a settlement deal between Al-Jolani's Syria and Israel. Al-Jolani's desire to integrate into Western and Israeli normality is all it takes, it seems, for him to become a convenient ally for the UK, despite his bloody past and the designation of the group he leads. More importantly, it suggests that for Starmer and his government, ideological alignment with Zionism and Western strategic interests excuses even the most heinous and barbaric of crimes, again throwing Starmer's lack of ethics or morals into light. If this is what he thinks passes for diplomacy, then he's a worse politician than I already thought, because this is just the abandonment of critique for the sake of pro-Israeli interests, is it not? The hypocrisy of the situation, of course, comes when we compare this with the UK's government's approach to Hamas, doesn't it? In 2021, the then Home Secretary Priti Patel proscribed the entirety of Hamas, collapsing the previously acknowledged division between a military wing of Hamas and a political wing. Well, the military wing has been proscribed for some 25 years now. The political wing was only proscribed in 2021, and that, of course, cuts off the ability to have any diplomatic ties, in theory. Patel made sure this couldn't be reversed either by proscribing both military and political wings in 2021 all in one lump together. Lump them in together. No differentiation between the two exists anymore. As a result of this, it has criminalised many forms of support for Palestinian self-determination. Lawyers representing Hamas in their current court case challenging their proscription have been vilified in the media, and the media have got away with it largely because of Patel. The lawyers have to fight to deprescribe both the political and military wings of Hamas because of what she did, giving the media the ammunition they need to attack them. The Labour government, with Starmer at the helm, himself a former human rights lawyer, as we know, or allegedly anyway, has made no effort to defend this principle that everyone deserves legal representation, which is true. And as much as he's apparently abusing the Terrorism Act, it is a position or provision within that same act that allows Hamas to mount this legal challenge. And yet, despite the law being clear on this, defending a proscribed organisation in court as is their right, it is being painted as a threat to national security instead. It's not like we don't have plenty of examples to choose from when it comes to establishment heavy-handedness, though, is it? The Met Police banning protests by Jewish protesters outside the Israeli ambassador's residence just yesterday, for example. The shocking case of the Met Police raiding a Quaker meeting house as well, where climate change in Gaza were being discussed by people snacking on breadsticks and hummus. Not to mention those singled out at pro-Palestine protests, which already suffer from authoritarian restrictions. All this heavy-handed policing doesn't happen towards those defending Israel and Zionist atrocity, though, does it? Al-Jolani's invitation becomes even more damning when placed against recent moves by the UK government as well. It was only last month that the UK lifted several sanctions on Syria, which was an act which obviously benefited Al-Jolani's mandateless administration. While the rationale provided was to ease humanitarian access, the de facto result was empowering a region ruled by a man considered a terrorist by UK law, all at the same time that Al-Jolani's HTS outfit were continuing to conduct raids and targeting Alawite civilians, minorities, in central and northern Syria, as documented by international human rights monitors. As that was happening, Starmer's government was easing restrictions to Syria. If they're on the prescribed list, you can't have one group bad, another group good. By law, they have to be regarded equally, and clearly that's not happening here. Exposing Starmer's hypocrisy and wrong-footedness all the more is the fact that an Iraqi member of parliament has filed a lawsuit against Al-Jolani for his past terrorist acts, asserting that his impunity emboldens others who would seek power through violence. But you won't have heard a dicky bird about that if you've heard about Starmer's invite to the UK yet. So here's an excerpt from the Cradle to explain this Iraqi point. Iraqi Member of Parliament Ala al-Hadari has filed a lawsuit with the Iraqi public prosecution against the new Syrian president Ahmed al-Sharaa, Shafaq News reported on the 29th of April. In a video statement from the Supreme Judicial Council building, Hadari said, "I filed the complaint against the terrorist Jolani, known as Ahmed al-Sharaa, who was part of ISIS organisations in Iraqi territory. This comes as the Syrian president received an official invitation from Iraqi Prime Minister Mohammed Shia al-Sudani on the 27th of April to attend the Arab League summit scheduled to be held next month in the capital Baghdad." I suppose it's fat chance to hope that a UK MP might do likewise here, eh? At the same time that all of this is happening, of course, legal teams in the UK are, of course, fighting for this deproscription of Hamas, and they're facing vilification for just doing their job. Everyone is entitled to legal representation. Their cause treated not as a legal question, but as a national threat instead, And given lawyers have lost their lives previously for challenging the state on legal matters, it's especially egregious. Starmer's meeting with Al-Jolani is being framed as a political engagement, and yet he uses the proscription of Hamas to justify not meeting the political representatives of them. Gaza's elected government, lest we forget. At least they got voted in, which is more than Al-Jolani ever has been. This double standard places Starmer, in effect, above the very Terrorism Act his government invokes to suppress dissent. If he can pick and choose who on it, he effectively decides to treat as a terrorist. The law's vague language has allowed it to be used as a political bludgeon against ordinary working class people, chilling free speech and protest under the pretext of national security. And while politics meetings are allowed under the Act even with members of proscribed groups, it does have to be made clear that is possible, this exception is clearly being weaponised here. So the message Starmer is sending here is very clear. If a group aligns with UK and Israeli interests, their crimes can be overlooked. If they challenge the prevailing order or advocate for Palestinian rights, they are to be continued to be branded enemies of the state. That is the double standard here, is it not? Summed up in one sentence. In the background of all of this is an even darker implication, though, regarding the erosion of democratic norms. When lawyers are attacked for representing unpopular clients, let's put it, when political protest is criminalised, and when known terrorists are welcomed because they serve political convenience, the rule of law itself falls apart, doesn't it? History offers dire warnings about what happens when legal and moral principles are undermined by ideology. It's not just a chronic lapse in political judgment by a political pygmy of a Prime Minister. It's a dangerous precedent that undermines the credibility of UK counter-terrorism policy, delegitimises its stance on human rights, and it erodes the public's trust in the integrity of what passes for the political leadership we've got even more. The invitation extended to Mohammed Al-Jolani by Keir Starmer is an absolute scandal that encapsulates the contradictions of a government willing to vilify Palestinian voices while legitimising those with blood on their hands. And that's not to say Hamas don't, because they do. But provided they align with Western and Zionist interests, exceptions are evidently going to get made. This moment demands scrutiny, protest, and above all else, accountability. And this story is not being well covered at all at this point, so that accountability doesn't appear to be coming from very many sources. It really needs to be. Meanwhile, for more on that story of Jewish protesters being banned from protesting outside of the official residence of Israel's ambassador to the UK, the Zionist cheerleader that is Zippy Hotovelli, in another example of the double standard at play here, check out this video recommendation here as your suggested next watch. Please do also hit like, share and subscribe if you haven't done so already, so as to ensure you don't miss out on all new daily content, as well as supporting the channel at the same time, which is very much appreciated, holding power to account for ordinary working class people, and I will hopefully catch you on the next vid. Cheers, folks.